So now we're talking about memories from trail. So, what is your favorite and your worst memory on trail?
Man, favorite memory would be didn't like anything, but that I have like a lot that I can choose from. I think it kind of like I think about different like sections of a lot of like the memories that I've been coming to recently are times that weren't even necessarily on trail, but in towns and stuff, just because I had a pretty great like social environment and like bubble of people that I was in while I was on trail, which was great. And I think related to that, there were a lot of times like in the Sierra where um, I was just meeting a lot of those people or just becoming connected to a lot of those people. So have really strong memories of, afternoons by lakes and things like that and people swimming or not swimming but jumping in the water and hanging out and eating snacks. I especially because that time it wasn't I was doing a lot like lower mileage, so I had time to like that I was giving myself to take breaks and things like that. um and then I think for more recently, um I really enjoyed like the, I guess, bigger mountains in Washington, um, around like Goat Rocks. That's another like a lot of people's favorite section or even like one of their favorite days from the trail, and that certainly was one of mine. Seeing Mount Rainier for the first time, or then not even necessarily the first time, but seeing it like way in the distance and then getting like closer and closer, um, was pretty great. And I had some, around sunsets and sunrises, like really, really beautiful views of Rainier. So I guess those would be a few favorites. Eating blueberries and huckleberries, but blueberries were my personal favorite. That honestly, like, I think, not that I was in a bad mental place that state of trail, but like I said, it was getting more difficult with the cold and things like that. And honestly, like eating blueberries or like having one, really remember one like where it had rained like a whole day straight. And then the next day, like had a really sunny morning, like that sunny morning, and had beautiful views and throughout that day as well. Just like remembering how much that brought up my mood. Um, in terms of least favorites, there are certainly some sections of trail that aren't quite as exciting as others. I think around like some parts of like NorCal, I was dealing with, and I think other people were dealing with too, kind of around like the like 1,000 mile mark or so, kind of like burnout and just like I don't know, like weird feelings about being on trail. I think a lot of it is like burnout, and it's still some beautiful areas, but maybe like less stunning views. And so I think some parts of trail around that time, I think I just also needed just some more time in town and kind of a break and things like that. So um that was where I was more like struggling a little bit. I had one, probably one of my least favorite, but like kind of like um, fun to, I guess, look back on and know that I've gone through it was in Washington, um, before getting into Stehekin. Um, there was one day where it had, I think, rained the night before. It rained a whole day, never let up, and rained all through the night. And it doesn't sound that bad, but like in the moment, it was like anyone I was seeing on trail, it was very low morale. It was like getting to the point where it was getting so cold, and because you are wet and can't warm yourself up, where, you couldn't use your hands. It was starting to get like scary, I guess, as opposed to just uncomfortable. And I think there were like a lot of people that day who were like, even being so close to the end of the trail, were like, I couldn't go through, like, if we had like multiple of those days in a row, like I couldn't finish the trail, which is like crazy to think about how you could spend so much time, like one day would ruin. But it was really difficult, and fortunately got into town the next day, and the rain did let up a bit, so I was able to dry my things out. But that, both because of the conditions that day and kind of thinking about like, oh, is this going to continue for the next week? And like I was saying, when it was getting so cold and rainy, I was really struggling to sleep. And so that obviously affects your ability to hike, your, you know, how you're doing mentally if you're going through multiple days in a row, like knowing you're just going to be like tossing and turning, like freezing all night long. So yeah, that was tough. But
That
good to
sounds
say that I
tough.
went through it. Yeah.
Yeah, you made it. You did it.
Mhm.
But yeah, definitely it's a mental game, and
Mhm.
it could, like you're saying, turn scary. Like a situation that kind of sucks can turn scary if, Mother Nature decides to make it a 10-degree night,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
something. It could be. So I'm glad everybody made it through okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
But yeah, that sounds really tough. And I'm going back to your comment about in NorCal when the morale was kind of lower.
Mhm.
I've heard a term for that. It's called NorCal blues. At least that's what in
Mm.
my year um, hikers were calling it, is NorCal blues, because you're kind of going through the Sierra and it's epic, and then you get into NorCal and it's not quite as epic. And
Mhm.
so I think a lot of people, um, it's just kind of this, you're on this trajectory of beauty, and then it just kind of diminishes a little bit. So
Yeah, I think it's some of that. I think some of it is just the point you're along in the trail, like, because I think it's pretty equivalent to like on the AT, people talk about the Virginia blues. I think it takes place at around like similar mileage, and so I think it's a lot of like, you're just physically tired. You've spent a lot of time on the trail by that point, but you also know like you're nowhere near finishing. So I think a bunch of things play in. I was dealing with fires at that point, so was kind of having to deal with like my um, original intentions for how I wanted to hike the trail were getting switched around, just because it was very difficult to maintain any sort of continuous footpath at that point, and so had to, reevaluate some things. But yeah.
right. Yeah, that could be, if that's kind of what you're expecting, continuous footpath, that could be kind of disappointing if
Hmm.
you can't do that. But it sounds like you still enjoyed the journey and everything kind of
Hmm.
at the end of it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's great. I didn't know that about, I guess I've kind of heard it in passing, the Virginia Blues, but I didn't realize it was at kind of the same mileage. That's really great to know. So I think you're right too. It's just that kind of mileage point where a lot of hikers maybe feel that way. It's like
Hmm.
I'm not there yet, but I'm also like I've gone far. And yeah, maybe at that point it's kind of like burnout sets in and that sort of thing. So that's good to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Virginia Blues, I'll have to remember that for the AT, just so I can expect it.
Yes.
Thank you. Good to know.